Dr. Fiona, when we were tuning together so many years back. So my bachelor's degree is in computer science. Right after campus, I joined an audit firm. I initially joined as a financial auditor, despite having done computer science. I think at that point, you just wanted to get a job, didn't care where it was. Yeah, so I joined Ernst & Young as a financial auditor. And then 6 months later, Ernst & Young introduced IT audits. And myself, having had a background in IT, I think as the only entrant at that point who had an IT background. So automatically the opportunity came to me. So we potentially were among the first IT auditors in this country. Yeah, so Ernst & Young introduced IT audits at that point. They took us to Nairobi for training, 6 months, because Nairobi already had IT audits being done. So I was at Ernst & Young for 3 years, then I moved to EcoBank as an information systems auditor. I was there for a very short time. I got married, had babies. After that, I joined MTN Uganda as a senior information systems auditor. I was at MTN for 8 years. Within that time, I did systems audits for, so the way telcos work is they have IT and then they have networks. So as doing IT systems for both IT and networks. But the good thing about MTN was that we were exposed to a lot of process reviews. So we were not only limited to IT, we did a lot of process reviews, like even financial audits, as well as other business processes. So we're not only doing IT. Then while there, I now specifically was doing mobile money audits. So I was the mobile money assurance manager by the time I left MTN. I left MTN, I joined a fintech, Wave Mobile Money. I don't know if you know it. It's the fintech with the penguin. It's also associated to SendWave. So I joined Wave as their head of risk and compliance. And the reason why now that opportunity came to me was because now I had done mobile money for 4 years. And they were looking for someone who had experience within mobile money. And that market pretty much opened up after the NPS regulations came into force, saying that the telcos had to split their businesses and have their mobile money as a different entity from the normal telco services. So it also then opened the market to other players to come in offering the fintech services. So I was at Wave for a year and a half. I moved to Stanbic for a few months, and then I left and joined Airtel. So I'm currently at Airtel. Airtel, I'm the senior auditor for East Africa. So I look after 6 countries, pretty much doing audit, which is both information systems as well as process and financial audits. So that is where I am at right now. So that's my experience in a nutshell. I think it must be over 15 years since we left campus. And time really does fly. I'm sure you come to realize. And I think when you realize that earlier, you then plan better. For me, I'll tell you that I didn't see the time run. So my major advice to you would be to know that one day you're going to look back and you'll ask yourself, where has the time gone? So maximize every opportunity that comes to you, study as much as possible, use the time that you have right now to advance yourself. Don't wait for tomorrow. Okay, so we'll jump into the presentation. I'll pretty much just go through internal controls. We'll go through, I'll just give you examples on where I've been, what I've interfaced with, what we've done, and a few trends that have happened in the recent years. Okay, so they define for us internal controls as a process effected by an entity's board of directors, management, and other personnel, designed to provide reasonable assurance. So the reason they say it's effected by the board is because the board is the owner, is the ultimate owner of the control environment, meaning they are the enforcers of the control environment. They enforce the controls. They ensure that the controls are enforced in the organization. So internal controls are pretty much the responsibility of everyone in that organization, right from the board to the last person on the organizational chart. So pretty much the role and objective for internal controls is to ensure that information is reliable, it's accurate, it's timely. So that means that if I give you an example of telcos, you don't want to transact today and tomorrow you're being given a different balance from what you expect. So for you at the end, for you as a consumer of that service, you want to know that the service provider on the other end is reliable. They're giving you accurate information, they're giving you timely information. So if you say, I want to know my balance, you should be able to get it at the time that you want to get it. So that's the function of internal control. So internal controls and the people charged with internal controls need to ensure that information in the organization is reliable, it's accurate, it's timely, it complies. They need to ensure that the entity is complying with applicable laws, regulations, contracts, policies, procedures. So there are many regulations that, laws and regulations that govern organizations. And so the internal control function, therefore, ensures that the organization complies with all the obligations of those laws. So if I give you an example of, say, a bank and even the fintechs, they're supposed to comply with the National Payment Systems Act, the National Payment Systems Regulations, the Financial Institutions Act, the AML regulations. For telcos, they also have UCC guidelines. So there are so many regulators that govern these entities. They're not only governed by just the major regulators. So for fintechs, the major regulator is Bank of Uganda through the National Payment Systems Act and regulations. But there are other regulators that they are required to comply to. So for example, the bank will comply with regulations from Bank of Uganda. They'll comply with regulations from the FIA, and those are to do with AML. Then, of course, there are other regulations like the Companies Act, Employment Act. So that's pretty much the role of internal controls, to ensure that the organization is complying with all those obligations. Then internal controls also ensure the reliability of financial reporting. So this is to do with company performance. And why this is important is because where you have unreliable financial reporting, this can easily be picked up by the regulator. For example, BOU sends their auditors into all the fintechs, into all the banks, to review their financials, review their controls. So if you have an unreliable internal controls function, that means that your regulator is going to pick up on these irregularities in your financial reporting. And these irregularities could be genuine errors, or they could be really management trying to hide some information. Maybe they're trying to understate their revenues so that they pay less taxes, or they're trying to overstate their revenues to please their board members or to please their shareholders. So all of that, internal controls is supposed to ensure that the financial reporting process is reliable. Then safety of company assets, this can be both physical and intellectual property assets or information, so to ensure the safety of these company assets. Then of economical and efficient use of resources, so that's to ensure that shareholders' money is protected, the company is using resources effectively, there's no underuse of resources or overuse of resources, to say that there's no overspend. So for example, most companies put in place budgets and you're supposed to work within those budgets. In fact, it's usually better for you to even save on your budget, but you find that where you don't have someone enforcing those controls, people are overspending, your expenses are high, and those are eating into your profits. Then they're supposed to ensure accomplishment of established objectives and goals for operations or programs. So every organization has their objectives, they have their goals, they have their targets. So the function of the internal control is pretty much to ensure that we are on track, that the organization is on track to achieve these objectives, to achieve the goals, to achieve the targets. So internal controls are intended to prevent errors, identify problems, and ensure that corrective action is taken. So this being an information technology class, I pretty much focused on cyber security, and I put up a few trends here on cyber security. So what we're saying here is the overall cybersecurity trend is clear. Attacks are on the rise. I know you might be aware of this, and most companies feel that they don't have proper resources to face the threats. Most users still aren't properly educated and still practice behaviors that put the company at risk. So cybersecurity incidents are on the rise. We've had quite a number here and quite a number outside Uganda. But this problem is closer to home because these days, almost on a monthly basis, you'll hear of an entity that has been compromised, money that has been lost, and of course, the company that is losing the money is supposed to compensate customers who are losing money. So at the end of the day, money might leave your account as a customer, but the company is the one that bears the loss because this money got lost in their territory, in their jurisdiction. So they're supposed to bear that loss. So what has been seen is that cybersecurity budgets as a percentage of the firm's total revenue jumped from 0.53% to 0.8%. So you see that companies are now starting to include a budget for cybersecurity. And that is to say, putting in place proper controls, training employees, employing the right people. So that is increasing the budget for cybersecurity. Then 30% of the executives say their budgets aren't sufficient to ensure proper cybersecurity. So this is a big problem. If your budget is not sufficient to ensure proper cybersecurity, that means you might be exposed in certain areas. Then 31% of the executives say their main cybersecurity challenge was improper identification of key risks. This is a big risk. So if you're in an organization and you're not able to identify key risks, that means you're not able to put controls in place to mitigate those risks. So when you have a risk in place, when you're able to identify a risk, then you're able to put in place controls that mitigate that risk to ideally either eliminate the risk completely or reduce its impact should that risk materialize in your environment. So if executives are saying they have a challenge in proper identification of key risks, that means that they do not know what they're exposed to. So anytime an incident is going to happen, and that is when they will discover that they had that risk within the environment only after an incident has occurred. And that means now, of course, you're losing money, you're losing time, and people are probably even losing their jobs. Then only 23% of companies say their cybersecurity metrics are well understood by board and senior executives. So one of the issues with IT professionals is they talk a lot of IT jargon. And yet most board members, now most boards are starting to incorporate ICT, people with ICT knowledge, but some are still traditional. They do not have these resources on their boards. So you find that the person who is training the board is using a lot of jargon. The board does not understand what they're talking about. And if the board does not appreciate what you're talking about, they're not going to support you in putting in place appropriate measures to close cybersecurity gaps. Because the board at the end of the day is the one that approves the budget. So if you come and speak jargon at the board, and then you're expecting them to approve your cybersecurity budget, most likely they will not approve it, or they will partly approve it, and you'll remain exposed because you do not have adequate resources to close the gaps. The average time to detect a data breach is 118 days. Now, for someone who has lived through incidents, 118 days of being in the dark is a long time. Because if you have a risk in the environment, and this risk has been exploited by someone, they've exploited the gap they've noticed in the environment, and you do not detect it for 118 days. That means for 118 days you're exposed. This person is doing whatever they want with your system. they're siphoning money out, or they're exposing your data to unauthorized people. So for you to be able to reduce the impact of a risk or the impact of a cybersecurity incident, it is good that you put in place controls, stringent controls, and those are detective controls, because detective controls basically help you to detect where an incident has occurred. So the quicker you identify an incident, that means the faster you react to it, and therefore that reduces the impact. If we could please mute that person. And that means that the faster you close the gap and therefore reduce the impact. So for example, in the recent past, most cybersecurity incidents have happened on a Friday, because they know that the fraudsters know that people are weekend mood, they've gone home, the next time they'll open their laptop is on a Monday. So Friday, Saturday, Sunday, you find that on those 3 days, they are pushing money out. And the only way they've been detected is because in some entities, they put in place detective controls. They've said if a certain activity occurs, then this is a red flag for us to do what? To react. So for example, if a particular account is depleted, that means, or it's depleted within a certain period, that means that this account most likely has been compromised, and therefore we react. So in those 3 days, one of the biggest frauds that happened in the telcos, in 3 days, they had siphoned out 10 billion shillings, 10 billion UGX. So imagine that happened over 118 days. They would completely wipe out a company's like revenues. They would completely wipe it out. So when you put in place adequate detective controls, you're able to reduce the impact. So if you can lose 10 billion in 3 days, imagine how much you can lose in 118 days. Then only 29% of companies reported using multi-factor.
Hi, Hilda. I don't know if it's just me, but
They're doing, you will be exposed, because the fraudsters know who has access, who has physical access to the computers, and the cleaners also know a lot of information. Like you might look at them as maybe they're just cleaners, they're coming in cleaning, going out, but they know who's who. They know who's doing what. So they will know which computer to compromise, or whose PC to compromise. So it's critical that even whoever gains access to the office premises is authorized. There's adequate tracking of whoever is gaining access, but also you as an individual, you're protecting the company's assets by being careful about where you keep your password. Okay. Then 44% of users reported recycling passwords across personal and business-related accounts. So you find that your Facebook password, your Twitter password is the same as your office password. Your office password is accessing the financial system of the company. So if you're compromised on Facebook, most likely you're also compromised at your organization. Then 62% of users have shared a password over email or text. The global spending on cybersecurity exceeded 1 trillion in 2021. So you can see how much that is costing economies and companies. 60% of small businesses go out of business after being victims of a cyber attack. I think now, like I was explaining, that one of those telcos lost 10 billion in 3 days. So now you imagine a small business, probably that's their entire capital, and they're losing it all in 3 days. So they'll be forced out of business. So cybersecurity is key for both large entities and small entities, because a hacker is not going to segregate between a small entity and a large entity. At the end of the day, what they want is money. So they will access it from whoever they can access it from. Right here, I'm just highlighting the cost of cybercrime. So the cost of cybercrime is pretty much, might not be just money, it will also be the other things that will be affected as a result of a cybercrime incident. So for example, damage and destruction of data. So if they access, let's say you're in a bank and the hacker accesses bank details, they could decide to destroy all your information. So you will never know how much balance a certain account had. Like, how do you recover if your information has been destroyed? Then stolen money, obviously, the motive is usually to gain money from these activities. So stolen money, lost productivity, meaning that when an incident occurs in an organization, everyone stops whatever they are doing to attend to that incident. So you find that time that would be spent making money for the business, you're firefighting instead. So lost productivity, theft of intellectual property, theft of personal and financial data. Now for personal data, this has even become more critical with the introduction of the data protection and privacy regulations. And these have been implemented across all nations almost. So even in Uganda, we have the data privacy and protection policy regulation. So if personal data is exposed, that means you are exposing yourself to fines from the regulators. Then post-attack disruption to normal course of business. This is in relation to lost productivity, meaning that you're not carrying out your normal business because you're all attending to the incident. Then forensic investigation, you might have to bring in experts to do that investigation to find out where you are compromised, who compromised you. So that's an additional cost. Then restoration and deletion of hacked data and systems. So you might incur costs in trying to restore your data, restore your system. And the big one is also reputational damage. So if you find that for you, your bank is always there are always reports of your bank being hacked, most likely you're going to move your account. You're going to be like, I can't risk my money. I'd rather move it to a bank, another bank, or a fintech. So reputational damage is a very big thing. If an entity is known for being hacked all the time, then of course they're going to lose the trust of their customers. Okay, so that graph there is basically showing give me a second, the estimated cost of cybercrime worldwide 2017 to 2028. So these are projections. And this is the cost in trillion on USDs. So by 2028, it's projected that the cost will be about 13 trillion. I think what we saw here was it 1 trillion? It was in 2021, it was 1 trillion. So by 2028, the projection is that it will have reached 13 trillion. So that is a lot of money being lost through controlling and managing cybercrime. Now, I have a few stats from the annual crime police report for 2022. There were 286 cases of cyber crimes reported, leading to a loss of 19 billion UGX. And only 16 million was recovered. Can you imagine that? 19 billion was lost and only 16 million was recovered. So these fraudsters basically they've studied the system and the ecosystem. So they know that if we compromise maybe 1,000 SIM cards, we can withdraw money from the bank, channel it to the telcos, and get it out through agents. Within the 3 days of compromise, it's not that this money is going to be withdrawn within Kampala because you assume that the crime happened in Kampala. You're going to find that the money is withdrawn across the entire country, in Lira, in Hulu, in Hoima, in Kampala, in Masaka, like across the entire country. And that makes it almost possible 200. What? Imagine out of 6 cases, 45 not public. So okay, so what are the key controls that like the minimum controls we need to have in the environment to protect ourselves against cybercrime? So asset categorization and prioritization, including asset ownership. That is to say that you identify the assets within your entity. Let's say you are telco. So you identify, let's say, your mobile money system, then you prioritize it. How critical is this system? If it's compromised, maybe it's high risk. Then you identify maybe your SIM registration system. How critical is this system? Then you categorize it and prioritize it. Then maybe your network systems, the charging system, and all those other systems. Then you categorize them and prioritize them. So that the systems that have maybe high risk, those ones then you put in place more stringent controls, because if they are compromised, then the impact to the business is really high. Then access rights definitions, assignment, and regular reviews. So what happens is you'll have access to a system, they'll give you different rights. Some people will have more critical rights than others. Now for you here, you who are doing IT, most likely you'll be systems administrators. Now systems administrators are usually super users. They have access to everything and they can do anything they want to do in that system. So being able to do regular reviews to see what are the systems admins doing. And not only systems admins, even people in finance, the people who disperse money, those are critical roles. So you need to be able to see what are they doing in the system. And you're not leaving them to do like to complete a transaction on their own. So you're putting in place segregation of duties. You're saying that if so and so initiates a transaction, it must be approved by another person on the system. So that if one of the people in that chain within that transaction is compromised, it is hard for two people to be compromised. But that is not to say that those two people cannot be compromised. They can decide to work together to compromise the entity. And that is where the regular reviews come in. So meaning now you have another party that is not part of the transaction who is looking at what these people are doing. So if the second layer of approval doesn't work, then you hope that the third person, the third reviewer, the person who's doing the reviews is able to pick up any anomalies. Adequacy of audit trails. So the audit trail should have a username. It should have the time of event, it should have before and after state of an event, the related IP address, edit rights on audit trails must be disabled, and then storage of audit trails. So you find that where some organizations are not keen, and where we were saying that some cybersecurity crimes take 118 days to be detected, if your audit trails are not stored, and maybe you overwrite them every month, that means by the time you detect your fraud after 118 days, you'll not know what happened because you no longer have audit trails. So being able to store the audit trails for purposes of facilitating future investigations. Then implementation of segregation of duties and 4I principle over critical activities such as adjustments. So usually what happens is within an entity, you'll have reversals and adjustments. Reversals are where you send money to a wrong individual. You call the call center, you're like, I've sent money to the wrong person. They reverse the money. Then an adjustment can happen when maybe you've sent them more money, you've sent to the right person, but you've sent more money and you're requesting them maybe to reduce it, something like that. So now the people who have access to these rights, the people in the entity who do adjustments. Adjustments are such that you can edit the amount, meaning that I can decide for a transaction that was 100,000, I can decide to put 1 million. I can decide to put the receiving account as my account. So that is where the fraud comes in. So now these ones are saying that introduce 4I principle, meaning for an adjustment to happen, there should be an initiator and an approver, meaning that the approver will review the supporting documents for the adjustment. So if the request came in to say, change the amount from 100,000 to 150K, or change it from 100,000 to 80,000, That is what the initiator should put in, and that is what the approver must approve. So the approver then is able to pick up on any anomalies. Suspense account management. So suspense account is where money that is usually, can I say, unsupported goes. For example, if you send money to an account that doesn't exist, that money will land on a suspense account. Now, who manages a suspense account? The suspense account is usually susceptible to fraud because it's money that we've not yet identified who it belongs to. So the person who manages a suspense account then also has to be monitored. And for money to leave the suspense account, there should be someone else authorizing it. It shouldn't be one person managing the suspense account. Then PIN resets and SIM swaps. So you've forgotten your PIN, and then you call into the service center, or you go to the service center and say you want to change your PIN. So the controls around that, because PIN resets are critical. And usually if someone steals your SIM card and they call the call center, let's say they stole your handbag. So they have your ID, they have your phone. They call the call center and say, and impersonate you. They say, I am so and so. I forgot my PIN. And of course, the call center is going to ask them, okay, give us your date of birth. What are your names? Which information they have from the bag they stole from you. And then they're going to reset your PIN and they're going to take your money. So the controls around PIN resets need to be very stringent. And what has been implemented within the industry, both for Airtel and MTN, is that when a SIM swap happens, the SIM swap is you want to get a replacement of your old SIM. So usually what will happen is the fraudsters might not take your phone, but they might swap your line. They might go to the service center and impersonate you, and they swap your line. And the moment your line is swapped, you, the actual owner, you lose connectivity. Another person who has your SIM card basically now can access all your information. So what the control that has been put in place is that is a PIN reset must not be initiated within 48 hours of having done a SIM swap, meaning that within 48 hours, if they've swapped your line, you're going to be wondering why you've lost connection. And most likely you're going to call or you're going to go to a service center and say, I've lost connection. And that's when you find out that maybe your card swapped, and therefore, so this control where we're saying PIN reset should not happen within 48 hours, meaning that your money is protected. So when you call the call center and you want to do your PIN reset after a SIM swap, you shouldn't quarrel with people saying that they are refusing to do a PIN reset. They're actually trying to protect you in the event that you are not the one who swapped your line. Then account creation, user account creation and roles definition. So creating accounts, maybe even for banks, or creating wallets for mobile money. These activities should basically have two people doing them. Then any payments made should also have more than one person. So the other controls that you can put in place are, of course, firewalls, network segmentation, and adequacy of implementation. So network segmentation will ideally identify and place different people in different networks. So meaning that if I belong to one network, I cannot access another network. So the way it was implemented in one of the places where I worked was, say audit could not access systems that finance could access. Or we could not, like if we went to sit in finance, we could not access our systems. So you had to be at your desk to be able to access your systems. Okay, I'll go to the next one. Authentication controls and two-factor authentication, password and one-time password. These ones now are very key. Because when you put in your password, you get a one-time password on either on your phone or it's auto-generated. This is also to protect you, to say if maybe your device has been stolen, they need an extra, there's another control that can protect you, which is a one-time password, and it goes maybe to a different device. So that person has to call you and social engineer you for you to share that one-time password. But most likely you become suspicious and you will not share it. Biometrics controls, these have been implemented maybe for SIM swaps, meaning that you have to put your thumbprint to ensure that whoever is swapping is the owner of the card and not a fraudster. Also, biometric controls help with physical access, that you cannot access certain buildings without your biometrics control. Then password controls and password rules. Complexity, passwords are not easy You don't have things like ABCD or AAA or maybe numbers. So complexity, that is a combination of maybe lowercase, uppercase numbers and special characters. Basically make it hard for fraudster to guess your password. Then the length shouldn't be 4, it should be, usually the recommendation is between 8 and 12. Regular change of password, password history, meaning that you can't use the same password the next time you try to change your password. Then certificate authentication and implementation of mutual TLS. So certificate authentication is to ensure that whoever the entity is interfacing with has certificate authentication. You're able to authenticate their certificate and you're able to grant them access to your information based on that activity to say that we know this person or we know this entity that's trying to access us. So anyone that fails that check then does not access your information. Then cybersecurity awareness is key for employees, it's key for customers. For example, the cases that we get on customers who have been defrauded, you find that people are social engineered so easily. You will find that someone was like, the fraudster phoned someone and said, give me your phone, I want to install something. And then they instead pick your password. Then they tell you, put in your PIN. Then you also put it in. And then before you know it, your money is gone. So regular training of people, you'll find that even the most elite will be defrauded. So this is very critical that organizations do cybersecurity awareness. Regular penetration testing to say that you have someone trying to hack your system, like it's called ethical hacking, meaning that you've given someone permission to penetrate your system or to hack your system, to see where the gaps are, to see where you can be compromised by an actual hacker. Change management controls, management of test accounts. So usually what you have within an entity is you'll have the test environment and the live environment. Then you'll have test accounts and then live accounts. So management of test accounts. Some frauds can occur on test accounts. Some frauds can occur in the if you've not segregated your test and live environments, meaning that you're doing your changes in the live environment, you could easily override controls. What has happened in the past is that people do changes on the system and you put controls in place, and then that change, once it's implemented, it overrides another control, leaving you exposed. Okay, that's the end of the presentation. I'll take questions.
Thank you, Hilda. So students, here's an opportunity to have a discussion. So please send the questions. You can unmute and ask, or you can type in the chat.
I've seen a question in the chat, but maybe if the person who wrote it could unmute and ask.
The one from Juliet.
I think so.
Highlighting how these things can test cybercrimes. When you say these things, do you mean controls? Juliet, could you please unmute and be specific with your question?
Yes, doctor. I was so confused when Madam was explaining the key controls to test cybercrimes. I wasn't understanding how the things can be used.
Use specific words. When you say those things, you mean the controls?
Yes, the key control she was explaining.
Okay, so the key controls are basically to help us detect, help us prevent cybersecurity crimes. So the controls that you put in place ideally should help you detect when an incident has occurred. And then what do you do after that incident has occurred, or to prevent that incident from occurring? I don't know if that answers you.
Madam, please, I'm sorry for disturbing, but there is I need an example, like where you said the SIM card resets or swapping. How can they detect in such case that something has happened?
Okay, so let's say your card has been swapped. If your card has been swapped, you, the user, will lose connectivity. You'll not be able to make calls. But also at the back office, the telcos are able to tell that your SIM card was swapped. As to whether it was swapped fraudulently, that can also be detected. Can I give you another example?
Yes.
Okay, so detecting cybercrime. So usually, what example can I give you? So the way like banks and telcos operate, so the banks usually, I'm sure you've interfaced with this. You pull money from the bank into your wallet. So what happens is that the bank maintains an account with the telco. They maintain an account with the telco. So let's say it's maybe DFCU Bank. So the telcos will have an account called DFCU Bank in their. So when money comes in from the bank, when money is pulled from the bank, it comes into the telco, and then that account that they've called DFCU within the telco is going to, there's going to be a debit on that account. Like money is going to leave that account and go into your wallet. Now, usually you know the trend of how often this account needs to be replenished, how often it needs to be refilled. Because as long as there's no money in that DFCU account, if you pull money from DFCU into your wallet, it will fail because the debit is not going to happen on that telco. So what will happen is that if that account is compromised, you'll find that it will be wiped out quicker than it usually is. And then probably then customers will call DFCU and say, I can't pull money from the bank, it is failing. And then DFCU will be like, but that's not regular. That's not a regular occurrence. Like it's not something we expect to happen maybe within a day of replenishing that account. Then they will then connect with the telco. Then the telco will say, this account has been depleted, but how has it been depleted? You will find that there are so many transactions going through of the same amount. And the way the frauds are done is that they will run a script that will ideally just credit so many accounts, maybe a figure of 5 million. So you'll see that so many, maybe like 500 accounts have all been credited 5 million, which is not a regular activity. So at that point in time, they'll be able to detect and say, we have a problem here. And then they'll be able maybe to turn off the service to stop it from continuing.
Okay, now I've understood.
Okay, that's good.
Thank you.
So Hilda, something that I always ask guest lecturers to help students understand, how did you move from being a computer science graduate to a senior information systems auditor? What are some of the things, certifications that you've had to do? What opportunities are there? The fact that we have undergrad students, what do they need to do? If there are any other opportunities that you think they should look out for them to get to, I'm just thinking for someone who wants to follow this career path, what should they do with their undergrad IST degree?
Okay. So like I told you, for me, it was, I can say God ordained because I left to go and do financial audits. Then they introduced IT audits within 6 months of joining Ernst & Young. But then what happened after that is we were required to do certificates in as a certified information systems auditor. It's a one-time exam. It's not as difficult as SCCA, which has 13 papers. This one is one paper. You do it and you're done. And then there's a certified information systems manager. It's an upgrade of the CISA certificate. It's also one paper. But then there are also other now advanced certificates. Like the CISP. CISP is more advanced than cyber than CISA, but your starting point should be CISA, but also it should be interest in the subject. Because okay, like if you're joining at entry level, pretty much Ernst & Young or the audit firms will just take anyone with a first class or a good second upper. So they'll just take you whether you've done pharmacy, you've done agriculture, okay, like they just, okay, now for financial audits, they'll just take those ones. But for IT specifically, IT audits now they'll take the IT audit, they'll take computer scientists, they'll take information or technology related graduates. But then you must have a very good degree. You must have a very good degree to get into the audit firms. But also, even now even the banks are also taking, they're also taking fresh graduates into doing like their information systems or doing their security. So it's not just the audit firms. What you need to do is have a good degree. So let's say maybe now, maybe because you're third years and you might be discouraged that you've not really performed so well, what you can do is seek for opportunities maybe to intern and learn. Like if you can get into an entity where they can allow you to intern, you go and intern and then learn on the job. So once you get in, usually even if you get in with a first class and then you go there and you're lazy, you don't want to work, you will not go. You most likely even be fired with your first class degree. And then the person who came in with not maybe like a second lower came in and they're hardworking, they're learning on that job, they'll stay on that job and they will grow. So at the end of the day, it's to utilize whatever opportunity you have. So it's a good starting point to have a good degree, but then if your degree is, there's nothing much you can do. But it's not like there's nothing much you can do. You still have maybe a semester or two. You can still improve your degree. Do as much as you can to improve your degree. And then get internship in a bank, in a telco, and then learn from those who are there. So experience, on the job experience would help you to advance. So because we all started at entry level, but then we learned from our supervisors, we learn and grow. And most companies will only retain you if you're performing. So if you enter with your first class degree and you're not performing, they will exit you. So you just have to go in and do the work, go in and learn. I think, yeah, I think that's what I can advise you to do at this point. But don't be discouraged. Any situation can be recovered, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Someone asked for your contact.
That's fine. I think I'll put it in the presentation.
Okay. I think you highlighted some of the organizations, typical organizations where wherever there's an IT function, there's definitely an opportunity for internship. So there was a question about, are there opportunities of interning? I mean, you're third-year students, in second year you did internship. So look out for organizations that have a serious IT function, probably those that are pretty much regulated. I think those are where the opportunities for IT audit might be. Someone is asking about certifications and where one can get those. I know you mentioned CISA and CISP.
So CISA is ISACA.
And there's an ISACA Uganda chapter. So guys, go online. I usually ask Taremo Morris. He's now with, I think, Equity Bank. He's the vice chairman of the ISACA Uganda chapter. But yeah, go online and try to find the ISACA Uganda chapter, get a contact, and they usually have very good opportunities for students who are interested. So yeah. Yeah, I don't see any other questions. Before Hilda goes, please use this as an opportunity to ask questions and to learn. You might not see her again in a while, or unless you retake the course, you might see her next year. But here is an opportunity to speak to someone from industry with over 20 years of experience. So yeah, 73 people on the call. So I would expect quite a discussion. The contact will be put on the slides, which I will receive and share. So please be patient. If there are no questions, I'd like to release Hilda. Hilda, there's a question. Is the auditing role very much similar to security officer role? This sounds like an askari. I don't know. What security officer? Information security officer, or please be specific.
Is systems audit limited to security personnel? You mean like guys who have done cyber security, information security officer? So no, they're not similar because an auditor. So there are 3 lines of assurance. You have first line of assurance is the business. There are 3 lines of assurance to say how like assets are protected within the organization. So first line of assurance is the business or the process owners. These are the ones who ensure we've put in place adequate controls. Then second line of assurance is risk management or internal controls. And then third line of assurance is audit. Now, audit is not at all involved in implementation of controls. An information security officer will be first line of assurance. They will be in the actual implementation. They'll be the ones doing the configurations. An auditor will just come and, so the audit work is basically to review evidence. You're looking at things that have happened. That is, you're reviewing what has happened in the system. While an information security officer is the one implementing what has been done, what is being done, or the controls to be put in place. So that's the difference. But both of them can lead you to the same career. Like you can come out of audit and go into security, or you can come out of security and go into IT audit. So at the end of the day, the 2 can end up in the same space. What does it require for me to do financial audit? Should do ACCA or CPA? So either or can work, but usually it's recommended to do ACCA. ACCA is, however, quite expensive, and CPA is cheaper. So you could do CPA and then upgrade CPA to ACCA. So what other, let me see that question. What does IT audit, how does IT auditing differ from other auditors, like from accounting departments do? And if I've done IT auditing, can't I do financial audit? So now, like for me, I started out as an IT auditor, but through different exposure and experience, I was now able to I can now do financial audits, I can now do process audits and not just IT audits. So it depends on how you utilize the opportunity. If you go in as an IT auditor, you can always tag along guys who are doing financial audits. And most times, usually that department can utilize an extra hand. So if you're the kind of person who can tag along and help them do audits, you learn how to do them and you can do them. But you cannot wake up on day 1 and you can do financial audit and you can do IT audit. You learn it along the way. Let me see. Are there opportunities of working interns abroad, specifically in IT audits? What I would advise you to do is gain some experience and then you can apply abroad. Or start with going abroad and start entry level. So most of these things is, you don't have to be one thing. Like you can always move, you can always grow your career. So I started as an IT auditor, I've told you, and then I went into risk management. And now I'm even back into audit. So you can move. You don't have to stick to one thing. So as you grow your career, or as you discover what your interests are, then you work along enhancing those interests. You study more, or you take up more roles that expose you to where you want to move to. Okay, what exactly is CISA? I thought if you do it, you don't need ACCA. So Certified Information Systems Auditor is specific to, now I'll just tell you that we had guys who did ACCA and then they did CISA. So it enhances your experience. So the guys who did ACCA and have done CISA, you'll find at the top type of resources like most banks will want. They want someone who has done audit, rather IT audit, and someone who has done financial audit. Because if you're a head of department, maybe let's say you're head of audit, you have to be able to supervise the IT auditors, you have to be able to supervise the financial auditors. So the two can go hand in hand, or you can choose a specific side. You say, I want to be an IT auditor. And then you go into IT security, and basically you stay in core IT. Or you can decide to do ACCA and you remain as financial auditor and go into the financial side. Or you can decide to combine both. Is ISACA for free? No, it's not free. I guess you meant the CISA certificate. It's not free, it's paid for. What's the salary of IT auditors? So I think the starting salary at my time was between 500K to 900K net. At my time, 20 years ago. So I don't know what it is right now. But don't look at the salary.
Maybe
Look at what you're
for
gaining.
entry, for the entry level,
Yes.
is there like a salary scale? Because I'm sure as you grow with experience, then you become a bit of a hot cake. So then your pay is probably dependent on what you're bringing to the table, the experience you're
Yes.
coming with. But if I'm just, entry level, is there some
Yeah.
sort of a range, or is it dependent from, is one organization to another?
So for entry level, I think it's like 1 million right now, because all entry level most times is the same. You find entry level. So it will be like maybe a net of maybe, let's say 1 million. And that's across different entities. So either it's an audit firm or it's ranging around there, 1 million, 1.5.
Okay,
But
there's
I
a
think
good one. Oh, okay, sorry.
if you get into a good place, you'd rather go in even at 500K, because you know what you're going to get from there is much more than the money. So you put in the time, gain your experience, and then you go. And not usually, whenever a good resource is noticed, they are grown, they're promoted, because no one wants to lose a good person. So when you get in as an entry-level person, everyone knows you're entry-level, you're just learning. So they'll cut you some slack. But then at some point, they will expect that you've grown. And how deeply you've grown will also be factored into your compensation. So when they're compensating you after a few years of working, maybe 2, 3, some people in 1 year can learn so much that they are promoted right away. Some people might take 3 years. So it depends on the individual. So if you put in the time and you learn your craft, then you grow. So that the 500,000 shouldn't discourage you if you get into a good place, if you get into one of those regulated places.
Okay, good question. What are the repercussions of doing wrong audits?
Now, those ones, first of all, if you're in the banks and the telcos, remember Bank of Uganda comes into the environment audit. So if Bank of Uganda comes in and they're picking up issues, they're picking up control gaps that you as an auditor didn't pick up, you're going to be blacklisted as someone who's not competent. So for example, Bank of Uganda always vets senior managers. So if you want to be a head of department, Bank of Uganda will get your history. They'll see where you've worked. They will not want to approve you in a bank if you're competent. Now, if you have a history of doing wrong things, like you're not competent, that can affect your vetting. Or now that's on the regulator side, or that's the Bank of Uganda side. Now, if you do a wrong audit and it leads to, you say maybe you say these controls are in place and yet you're not in place, and then the company gets compromised, they lose money, they're going to fire you. You're going to lose your job. And then the next job you try to apply for, they will call your previous company to find out why did you leave. And then your company will say the person was fired. Why were they fired? Incompetence. You get it? So it's better that you put in a lot of effort in your work. So it has repercussions that go with you. Every wrong thing you do has repercussions that go with you. It's harder for you to come out of a wrongdoing.
Okay, thank you. Who regulates auditors?
Institute of Internal Auditors. Institute of Internal Auditors. And then also ISACA for IT auditors.
Okay. Thank you, Hilda. I don't see any other questions. I'm only saying thank you, thank you, thank you. Yeah, I will share the slides once I get them. Oh God, okay. I've talked about this actually in the lecture. How is internal audit different from external audit?
Okay. So external audit usually comes in to give assurance of maybe financials, the company's financials. And the external auditors, let's say the IT auditors who will come in, will basically be looking at the systems that affect the financial statements. So for them, they come in to give an opinion on your financial statements. Internal audit is, so external auditors are maybe coming from an audit firm. They don't sit on site. They only come in at the time they're supposed to do the audit and come out. Internal auditors are employed by the organization, and for them, they will look at everything, but they'll not give an opinion. They'll not give an opinion on the financial statements. What they'll do is they will audit and maybe rate your environment. And usually the internal auditors are supposed to pick out more issues than the external auditors, because external auditors come in for a very short time and they do not have the advantage of knowing the environment as much as an internal auditor. An internal auditor has an advantage over an external auditor with regards to auditing that entity, meaning that when I'm an internal auditor for Airtel, every day I'm interfacing with the business, I'm interfacing with different people, I'm talking to them during lunchtime, I'm asking them about the controls in the environment, I'm asking them for the information. So I know the organization inside out, and I can easily pick out where the problems are. But an external auditor is coming in once in a while, and they're specifically looking at specific information, but they're not going deep into that information. But that is not to say that external auditors are disadvantaged generally as in career than internal auditors. External auditors also have an advantage. Audit, as in they have that wealth of experience of auditing different entities in the course of their careers, while an internal auditor will only be auditing the entity that employs them.
Okay, thank you. There are questions. I think someone came late. They're asking, do I need to do CPA to do audits? I think, anyway. Hilda, do you?
So if you're doing financial audits, you'll have to. But if you're interested in doing IT audit, I would advise you to do CPA. Just like I said, I gave you an example of a former colleague who had done SCCA and did IT audit to enhance their SCCA experience. Also, you as an IT auditor, CPA enhances your experience, meaning that you're even a hotter cake than someone who has just done IT audit, or someone who has just done CISA, or someone who has just done CPA. So it's a good paper to have. And it's sometimes you look at it as something that's going to take a lot of your time, but it's just 3 years. And like I was telling you, time goes by so fast that in the next 3 years, you could be a CPA as well as a CISA, and you'll be a very hot cake if you combine those two. Because now, as an IT auditor, you're going to go and audit financial systems. If they're telling you, we debited this, we credited this, and you're lost, or the system debits and credits, and then you don't know what a debit is, you don't know what a credit is. You know it. So if you combine the two, it even makes your work easier. So don't look at the time to say, it will take long. It will not take long. In 3 years, you could be You could be an expert of both. I would highly recommend it if you choose to go into the audit space.
Okay, someone's asking about aviation auditing. Would you like to say something about that? Are there any institutions
Well,
that are able to provide training for aviation auditing? I don't know if someone wants to get
interestingly,
into.
I have a friend who does that for CAA, and she had to do piloting. She came from at uni, she did library. I think that course is called library and something.
Library and information science.
That one.
Mm.
And then somehow she ended up in CAA doing managing their library, and then she moved into now regulating like pilots, and then she did piloting. So you see how your career can move. You don't have to be wise, like you keep enhancing it. So now, right now, she does these audits, like she certifies pilots. She travels a lot to even to like the aviation authorities in other countries. Yeah, so I think it's doable, but I don't have all the details.
Also imagine you need to first get into an organization that is involved in that kind of work, and then you'll be exposed to certain opportunities. But I'm not sure you're able to come from undergrad and then apply to, aviation audit. You probably no one will open the door for you unless they're sure that you're coming from an aviation space or an aviation industry or organization. Yeah, so it might help to first get into that industry, learn, and then see how you can grow in that audit function for that particular industry. Why is it that people panic when the external auditors are coming?
What can I say? So generally people fear auditors, even internal auditors, because no one wants their work to be reviewed. Because even the internal auditors, themselves go through audits. So everyone is audited, and they will come that time when you panic. Maybe you're not sure about the work you've done. I think it's a natural reaction, but people usually, but now even the audit, I think the auditing has changed to be more of value addition than policing. In the past, auditors were like police. They would just come and write reports, write recommendations. People get fired, management gets fired because of an auditor's report. So if you're doing the right thing, ideally you shouldn't fear auditors, because pretty much the role of audit is to test and see if controls are working, because all organizations have controls. And usually you, as a person who's being audited, you will say, yeah, the controls are in place. Then the auditor will come to confirm that those controls are in place, that you're doing what needs to be done. But that panic now is pretty much, it's something that we can say almost of the past.
Hey, Peter, you were really late to the lecture. I am afraid that I really feel sad that I don't want to make Hilda repeat about these certifications. And maybe you can listen to the recording. Hilda, there's a question from Bahati. What challenges do auditors face in the field? Do you like to say something?
Okay, so for IT auditors, usually the biggest challenge is you're going to audit people who have been, you're going to audit most times maybe like systems administrators, database admins. So these guys have been working in IT for years. And then for you as an auditor, you don't have like hands-on experience. So sometimes you'll ask questions and they'll lie to you. And you might not be able to pick up that they're lying to you because you don't have hands-on experience. Then sometimes they can choose to argue with you on a technical basis, and you don't have in-depth knowledge to argue with someone who has hands-on experience in IT. So there, what usually happens is you as an IT auditor, you're supposed to also equip yourself, like you're supposed to learn a lot in terms of how do you identify risks within IT. And then the controls also you're recommending are feasible controls, because you might be recommending something that's not feasible. So, and that is where the argument comes in. So they will argue with you, and then you'll end up probably just dropping the issue, and yet there was actually a risk. So the knowledge, you need to amass a lot of knowledge as an IT auditor, almost to be as knowledgeable as the IT people. I think that's one of the biggest challenges.
Okay. Is there, how do you get protected? For example, if you audit an organization and you find that there's lots of things that are going wrong, and in addition to the question about people panicking because probably they know that something is off.
Yeah.
And in the past we've seen, say, people who unearth fraud or things like that, for short, or they're threatened. How do you protect yourself, or what protects you as an auditor?
So it depends on how you do your work. For example, if you're doing an investigation, don't go around telling everyone you're investigating so and so. Like telling everyone what you're doing, because then you're going to hinder your work. First of all, probably they'll whistleblow to the other person, they'll cover their tracks, but then you'll also be exposing yourself. So the need to be very discreet in your work, in what you're doing, if you're an investigator. And then also to be careful, like, because we know that that's like an inherent risk within audit. Now, like, I know some heads of like audit who don't like eat at their workplaces. They're careful about where they eat because it's a real risk. But we are here. How many auditors have you had were killed? Most times, you live through it and you survive. Because I've been doing audit for 20 years and I've never been threatened by anyone. But yes, the threats usually are more channeled to investigators, because investigators now are coming to do a forensics audit or a forensics investigation. Those ones receive many threats. And usually what companies do is, for those ones, probably they'll give them additional, maybe security at home, or they'll have a panic button at home, but not usually auditors. Auditors not so much. It's the investigators that face many of those, the risks to life. For them, they receive phone calls, someone tells you, I'll harm you, or they threaten to bewitch them. There are all sorts of things. Yeah, but the organization usually tries to protect them.
Okay.
Yeah.
Someone's asking about certifications. Maybe you could just speak about the ones that you've done. What's the time schedule? How much time did you have to put off to do these certifications? You talked about a number of papers. How long does that usually take?
So CISA usually takes, I think, like 6 months. Like, it's really how prepared you are, because it's you register and then you study and do the paper. So it's just one paper. So it's how ready you are, then you decide when to do it. Same thing as CISM, which is Certified Information Systems Manager. It's also one paper. You basically pace yourself. So you can pace yourself, maybe you read 3 months and do it, or 6 months and do it, or 1 year and do it. So it's really up to the individual. CPA is the one that takes a bit of long, CPA and SCCA, because now for them there are 12 papers. You also pace yourself. You can decide to do 3 papers per sitting or 1 paper per sitting. So the fewer papers you do, the longer the course. The more papers you do, the shorter the course. So it's really the individual who paces themselves.
Okay, thank you so much, Hilda. I will wait for the slides and then I'll share the recording. I'll put the recording on Muele and the slides will be on Muele. So please make Muele your friend. Oh my goodness. Is there cloud auditing?
There should be. I think anything system related should be audited. Yeah.
Hey guys, internet is your friend. Hey, yeah, Google is your friend. Yeah. Thank you so much, Hilda, for sharing your knowledge and your experience. I think I'll stop the recording now and I'll release you to go. Thank you so much again. I'll be in touch and I'll wait for the slides. And yeah, to the students, I'll share the slides on Mwele as well as the recording. Here I'm going to talk about test scope and issues with groups, but I'd like to release Hilda now. Thank you, Hilda.
It's been a pleasure. It's been a pleasure. Thank you for having me. So it's always a pleasure being here and talking to your students. Hopefully you make good decisions with your careers. And I wish you the very best.
All right. Thank you so much. Okay.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.